All right, I just want to say a few things about today's, whether you call it celebration or you call it remembrance. Today is January 4th, 15th. They call it Armed Forces Remembrance Day. But I wonder why they will call it Armed Forces Remembrance Day, anyways, because there are a lot of complications. It is traceable to the January 15th coup d'etat that took place somewhere in 1966 in Nigeria. 3 years after Nigeria became a republic, 6 years after Nigeria got what you call independence. So that event was the taking over of government by the military. It was led by Kaduna Ziogo, and then um what's this guy's name again, Seth? Aguiyi-Ironsi, General Johnson Thomas Aguiyi-Ironsi emerged the head of state. As soon as he became head of state, he went into the promulgation of Decree 34. With the Decree 34, he turned Nigeria into a unitary system. According to the military, the north belonged to Hausa Fulani, the west belonged to Yoruba, the east belonged to the Igbo, and Nigeria belonged to nobody. So, in his what he claimed to be wisdom, he decided to unite the country and give us a unitary system where everybody would be identified as Nigerians, not just by words but by cooperation. I do not know who gave them those kind of advices those days, but I would like to just talk about the Armed Forces Remembrance Day. But quickly, I would like to mention a few casualties as a result of that coup d'etat, and that will lead us to the question: is it supposed to be the Armed Forces Remembrance Day or the Bloody Civilians Remembrance Day? Because the people you celebrate as your military, your armed forces, they don't see you as humans, they see you as bloody. So they call you bloody civilians. So when they look at you, they are seeing blood. That's why they they send you to early graves. In other countries, the armed forces protect the integrity of the nation. It is the armed forces that make sense of the sovereignty of every nation. They protect the territories from external aggression or invasion. Just for example, if we had the armed forces that is anything to write home about, we wouldn't necessarily wait on Donald Trump to send military support to Nigeria. We wouldn't have a situation where we would wake up on a Christmas day to a gift from Donald Trump to the Sokoto Caliphate. That's because we do not have the armed forces. We just have their names. We have their uniforms. We have their weaponry, but in practice, we do not really have the armed forces. If we had the armed forces, flags of ISWAP, Boko Haram, and the like wouldn't be hoisted in the Nigerian territory. In fact, those militias have gone ahead to collect taxes from the locals, and we claim to have armed forces and we are celebrating. I don't know if it's celebration, I don't know if it's remembrance. If it's celebration, what are we celebrating exactly? Are we celebrating the armed forces that meddle in politics? Or are we remembering the armed forces that send civilians to early grave? Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was the premier of the North. He was deleted on January 15. Ahmadu Bello was the premier of, sorry, Ahmadu Bello was the premier of the North. Abubakar Tafawa Balewa was actually the prime minister. Sorry, I made a mistake. Tafawa Balewa was the prime minister, while Nnamdi Azikiwe was like the Queen's representative. So Tafawa Balewa was the prime minister of Nigeria. He was deleted on January 15. Ahmadu Bello was the premier of Northern region, Northern Nigeria. He was deleted on January 15. These are bloody civilians. Samuel Ladoke Akintola was the premier of Western Nigeria. He was deleted on January 15. Festus Okotiebo was the Minister of Finance. He was deleted on January 15. Hafsatu Bello was Ahmadu Bello's wife. I don't know what the woman did to the armed forces. She was deleted on January 15. Lateef Ademulegon, wife to General Ademulegon, she was deleted. Her husband was deleted. She too was deleted. Her husband was military. Herself, bloody civilian, deleted. Ahmed Ben Musa was senior assistant secretary to Ahmadu Bello. He was deleted, civilian. Zarumi Sadauna, Ahmadu Bello's family relative, bloody civilian, deleted. Ahmed Pategi, Ahmadu Bello's driver, bloody civilian, deleted. All these people were deleted by the armed forces on January 15. But today is January 15, 2026. Every January 15th is set aside as Remembrance Day of the Armed Forces. Who is going to remember bloody civilians? Which day will be set aside to remember bloody civilians that were deleted in cold blood? How will the families of Ahmadu Bello, Okotiebo, Ladoke Akintola, Tafawa Balewa, how will their family feel when it is January 15 and I think it's a public holiday, everybody stays home to remember the military and cheer them up for a wonderful work they claim to do in Nigeria. January 15 was a bloody day on bloody civilians. They took over a civilian government that was just trying to find its bearing. A lot of you would say it was the military that built so and so. It was the military that developed so and so. You mentioned Third Mainland Bridge. You mentioned all of those places. They make sense to you, but they do not make sense to me. It's just like when we want to argue about um, how the European invaded Africa. There is a class of people who will say before the white men came, Africa didn't have this, Africa didn't have that the white people brought Africa to light. It makes sense to you, it doesn't make sense to me, because Africa was growing and developing at their own pace. If Africa didn't have light, it was because they were still going to have light. But it was cut short by foreigners. So the same thing goes to the civilian government that was toppled by the military. Whatever it is the military did in Nigeria, the civilians or the civilian government was still going to do. It's just a process. But you cut short that process, you know, and that have resulted to everything we suffer in Nigeria. Some of those things will stay with us, those negative repercussions of January 15 will live with us forever. The Igbos that are clamoring for Biafra, forget that Nnamdi Kanu has been sentenced. It's only a matter of time before someone else comes out. The Igbos will forever keep feeling marginalized. The marginalization goes round. Everybody who is not connected to the politicians are marginalized. But there is an aspect of the marginalization that the Igbo feels that no other people feel. That aspect of marginalization is as a result of January 15, what the armed forces did. A lot of time we blame Hausa Fulani for holding on to power. We blame them for being power drunk. Are they the only people that are in Nigeria? Why is presidency their birthright? It is owed to January 15 because that coup d'etat was orchestrated in a way that made the Hausa Fulani to feel attacked, to feel like they are targeted. Remember, they were the first to ask for secession. They called it Araba, because they felt attacked. So the counter coup was for them to take over power and never to let power slip out of their hand again, because that is the only way they will protect themselves. January 15. It is this same January 15 we will come and celebrate the military for truncating our democracy. Apart from January 15, there are a lot of things that the military have done in support of the backwardness of Nigeria. But in all these things, we are celebrating them. We take flowers, we do salutes, we sing, they play their drums, we celebrate them. The military is the number one problem of Nigeria. They started the backwardness of Nigeria. Yes, the politicians or the civilians have their own, but they can't be worse than the military. In fact, when the people want to stand up and ask for their right, the politicians use the military to attack them. We know of NSAS. We know of a lot of times Nigerians want to go out to protest and ask for their right, that the military will be, or the armed forces will be unleashed on them. We know of Python dance. We know of crocodile smile. Nnamdi Kanu has been released by the court. He has been released from prison to go home. Few days later, the armed forces that are being celebrated today invaded his hometown, deleted people. That led to the end of Nnamdi Kanu's parents. That was why Nnamdi Kanu ran away from Nigeria, to protect his life. The Nigerian state is heavily militarized. The constitution or the decree 1999 that we are using today, that almost everybody have said is the problem. We have been saying scrap the constitution. It was a military constitution. So all around you in Nigeria are problems of the military. But every 15th of January, we come together to celebrate our problems. Nigeria likes celebrating their problems. That's why their problems remain. What the military, the armed forces have done in Nigeria, what they are doing, and what they will keep doing as long as we keep celebrating them, will continue to put Nigeria backwards. We remember our freedom fighter, Fela Anikbola Kuti. His mother was thrown from a story building in Kalakuta Republic. She fell from a story building by the armed forces. Nobody knew who sent them or how they even tagged them unknown soldiers. That was how Fela's mother passed. So what the military have done is not worth celebrating, is not worth remembering. But because history is to be told, we would always tell our history. I wonder what you'll be telling your children about the Armed Forces Day today. But I'll urge you to tell them the truth. We can't continue celebrating our problems. The Nigerian Armed Forces are our problems. If left with the politicians alone, if left with the civilian leaders, they no pass us. I remember back then in Nigeria, if citizens went out to protest, you would see police officers. They wouldn't actually stop protesters. They would come with batons to beat any protester that would want to destroy. But we became so militarized that they can shoot. You know, at the Lekki toll gate, it was citizens holding the flags of their nation. That was their arm. And bullets were released. The armed forces were shooting the armless forces. But we cannot remember NSAS. The NSAS memorial is a private memorial where citizens just remember October 20, 2020. But the government have not institutionalized that day, but they institutionalized the day that the armed forces started the problems that have led Nigeria into this disaster of a reality, and we all support them. There are a few of us that will not keep quiet because we do not have another country. When you started thinking you've escaped Nigeria by relocating abroad, Nigeria started reminding you you go nowhere. As a matter of fact, the fact that you've run out of your country is a testament to the truth that Nigeria follows you. Because if Nigeria was okay, you wouldn't go to become in some of those countries, you are fourth class citizen. Sometimes you do not even have a status. You're an illegal, not resident, you are an illegal dweller. You are living illegal, you are illegal. It is because of Nigeria. But we just wouldn't just keep complaining, but we have to act. And I'll still ask, what are you afraid of? You speak, you delete. You don't speak, you delete. Why don't you speak? Stand up for your rights. And if you delete, as a matter of fact, a person who um, lost their life fighting to have it, it was a death worth living. The Nigerian armed forces are the number one problems or the number one problem Nigeria has. Until we stop celebrating our problems, we are going nowhere. The other day, the Senate President Akpabio posted that it was his birthday. The same people who were always dragging Akpabio, set and punish you, e no go better for you, Adiagono fee, thunder fire you, egbe enigwe dagbo oge, kò ní dá fún ẹ. Those same people were saying, Happy birthday, your excellency, your whatever, see, or your majesty. I don't know what they call. They were wishing him happy birthday. Your oppressor, you've identified him as your oppressor, but happy birthday. Tinubu's son, who is the acting assistant president, you will abuse him, curse him, drag him. Immediately he posted 40th birthday. Everybody, happy birthday. May you live long. Live long to do what? So if these people are oppressing you and you're asking them to live long, don't you think it is Stockholm syndrome? Ask yourself that question. Thanks for watching.